Good evening and welcome to Ask the Mayor. Tonight is a really special night because this is Blaine Michealis' last official meeting here in this program, and we're planning this evening to kind of go through a little reminiscent by Blaine of his career. He spent 40 years in city government, and always in a management track of city government, starting as everybody does, I guess, as probably an intern somewhere.
Yep.
But the last 19 years and 3 months, he's been here in San Dimas as our city manager, done a great job in every aspect of being here. And I'm sure that all of you who know him or have had any contact with him know what a fine person he is. But we thought this would be a good opportunity for him to just kind of go through some of the things, the highlights, and maybe hopefully no lowlights at all. But we're going to try to do that, and that's the primary focus of our program tonight. If you want to call about anything, you feel free to call, but our primary program going through is going to be Blaine basically telling us the things he's learned and observed as he's gone through a really very fine career as a public servant. I think we could start off with maybe even I might ask him why, when he was recommended that we present the opportunity for him to apply at the city of San Dimas, what caused him to apply. So maybe you'd like to tell us that, Blaine.
I'll start with that first. You know, at the time I was in King City in southern Monterey County, and things were going very well. But I just had this feeling that maybe there was a time, an opportunity to take the next step for me. Because it could have been, that was the timing and all that kind of stuff. And so I was minding my own business, and Bob Poff was a former friend and associate. I'd met Bob when I was in Claremont many years before. And so I knew him. I knew of him. And then Bob went, after he retired from San Dimas, he became a consultant with a sales tax firm, and he would then go to cities throughout the state to deliver their sales tax information. And so he came to King City. And
Hello, you're on the air. Thank you for calling.
Good afternoon, Mayor Morris and Blaine Michealis. Blaine, this is for you. This is Marcella Sewell. I'm going to miss you, Blaine, and you have a great retirement, okay? And enjoy yourself, and thank you for serving our city all these years. I appreciate you, Blaine. You take care, okay?
Thank you. You're very kind.
Thank you very much for calling. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Marcel. That was very kind of you. So I renewed that relationship with Bob kind of later on after a while. So I was sitting minding my own business in King City, and Bob was conducting the the recruitment process for the opening in late 1999, in the San Dimas opening. And so he actually reached out to me and invited me to consider San Dimas. He didn't have to reach out too hard or twist any arms, because I knew of San Dimas by being in Claremont, and I knew of Bob. And so I thought, well, this is a good thing. So I went ahead and made that application. We had been kind of snooping around at other cities at the time, and so I was open to the idea. And so I did, and things just kind of continued to unfold, and great things happened. And I'm glad that Bob thought of me at that time. I may have picked up on it on a job announcement, but it was Bob's personal invitation to encourage me to apply, and that opened that door.
Well, you never know when doors will open, or you'll go through and say, what have I done? I hope that after looking back 19 and a half years later, you'll say, or you'll be able to say, that was a good door.
You know, there were some options at the time, and there were some things that we were exploring. Some of them you would almost think, oh, this is going to be a really good opportunity for me and my family. But all of those things, Kurt, looking back on the opportunities that were potential at that time, or anything else, this has been just a great match for me. I couldn't have hoped for a greater experience than to come here and to participate in these kinds of things with this community this council and other council members, this staff and all the staff that had worked here. It just couldn't have been a better experience for me. And I am incredibly grateful.
Well, now that we've got that out of the way, why don't we just go on with what you'd like to say about your career of 40 years that's coming to an end, and you're looking at what has happened. And
well, I'm hoping to keep my composure through this. Maybe, the story always starts in the beginning, and I shared this, earlier on this week. I was all set to be a high school basketball coach. I thought that's what my purpose and my experience in life would be, and so I was going through those things, which is a bachelor's degree in physical education, certifying to teach, taking coaching classes so that I could apply myself to that field, and doing those kind of things, taking those classes, being in that environment. And as I mentioned, on the second floor of a gymnasium, which I would never have had a reason to go to, but I was that day. And I walked up the first flight of stairs and turned and walked up, and as I looked up to the top of the stairs where I was heading, there was a poster. And the poster had a simple question. It said, "So you want to be a city manager?" with a question mark. And Kurt, for some reason, that question just captured me. And I thought, I don't know, what is this? Because when you're in that circumstance and that part of life, I hadn't even heard the word city manager, but for some reason it connected to me. And so I wrote down the contact information, spoke to the professor that operated the Masters in Public Administration program, because that's what it was. And from that point, it was like a hand in a glove, comfortable pair of shoes. I started the program, and it just matched up with things that were interesting to me and challenged me and reflected things that just seemed very important and just the right fit. So it was a 2-year program, and in between there was an opportunity for an internship. So I worked for a small city in central Utah called Mount Pleasant. And there were
Good name.
There were more turkeys than people. It is the turkey capital of Utah. There were like 20,000 turkeys and 2,000 people. And in fact, you want to keep the turkeys very calm, because when 20,000 turkeys get aggravated, it's a dust storm. And not only that, they trample over each other, and you can lose 10% of your birds in one nervous experience. So you wouldn't want to lose 2,000
like a cattle stampede,
yes,
but turkeys. Huh?
And you cringe because 2,000 turkeys would lose their life if they all got agitated somehow. So you want to keep the turkeys real calm. But it was the beginning of just learning and testing and figuring out what it was like to be involved in city government. Because it was small, they had lots of things to do. It got to the point where, I think I mentioned the other night, they were installing their first sewer system. And that meant sewer pipes in the street and sewer connections, all of those things completely new. And they said, "Blaine, we need your help. We need to go do sewer inspections to make sure they're correct." So I go and stand over the ditch and look at the pipes and say, "Well, they're close enough for me. How about maybe a little of duct tape, and then things will kind of be okay." So I'm sure that the duct tape may have worn out by now, and when it came time for Memorial Day, it was a city cemetery, so the cemetery needed to look perfect, or as best as it could. So, "Blaine, can you get behind the lawnmower and clean up around those headstones?" And I remember today, I was trying to get nice and close, and I got real close to one. There were angels on each corner of a baby's headstone, and I clipped one of the angels right in half. Ooh. And I didn't know what to do. So I just simply picked up half of the angel, put it on top of the other one, and kept going. So as you can tell, I've carried this burden with me for 39 years, and I hope that family's okay with all that, but I just didn't know what else to do.
Maybe you can go back and get put a little bit of goop on it. That'll hold them together.
I should have taken the gum out of my mouth and done something like that. But
yes,
it was just fun, Kurt. It was just enjoyable. Great people and getting a feel for that. So the second year of the master's program went really well, and we thought, well, now where should we go? Where is the place where there's a best opportunity for a career in local government? And at the time, Texas and California are obviously big states, and they're the ones that had most of the city management, level of government already in place. And so we looked at Oregon for a little bit, but ended up interviewing in Claremont. And that's where my first full-time job. Came as soon as I graduated. So we started in Claremont in 1981, just after a very good council member started his career in San Dimas, a la Kurt Morris. If I would have known, Kurt, at the time that I was 3 miles away from you, I would have made contact somehow. Maybe if I go back in time and you find something, you know, a letter from me in the future or something.
We can find a time machine.
I'd like to come back and at least say hi, because we were 3 miles apart at the beginning of all this stuff. But in Claremont, great experience, great town, great people, great staff. And so it was the beginning of a career. So the usual entry-level assignments came my way. Claremont used to collect their trash with little dumpsters and a truck that drove down the middle of the road, and because Claremont did not want to have the trash cans at the street, so they take golf carts up in your driveway and put them in the little golf cart dumpers, and they go to the big truck, and everybody would just go down the street, fanning out and collecting the trash. And Claremont said, you know, this is kind of expensive. Is there another alternative? And the technology at the time was moving toward automated refuse collection system, which is the mechanical arms that would come out from, like they are now. Yeah. They would come out from the truck, and it was brand new back then. It was Godzilla and Son of Godzilla were the names of the trucks. And so my job was to kind of look at the financing of that, how we're going to charge the rates, you know, and then making the decisions with others, what kind of containers. And then Blaine, Claremont needs to understand what this new system is. It's up to you to go on the road and figure this out and tell people what it's all about. So we had a Volkswagen at the time. So I stuffed a 35 millimeter projector into the back of a Volkswagen that was the reel-to-reel film, a screen, and I would tie a 96-gallon container to the outside of my Volkswagen, because I had to take a prop to show people how big the containers were. I got special dispensation from the police department not to give me a citation hauling these trash cans, you know, roped to the back of a Volkswagen. And I made 35 presentations to anybody that would even listen to me. The bingo club, you know, the Wednesday afternoon book reading club. And they would smile and just, now that's a nice young man in telling us about this. And on Saturdays, we would put a trash truck in their shopping centers and demonstrate how it picks up the trash cans and answer questions. And so, Kurt, it was just fun.
You know, I think the image of you getting in and out of a Volkswagen would have been pretty entertaining.
Well, yeah, 35 times, or 75 if you count the in and out. But again, just tremendous interest and excitement, and it was just so exciting for me. But it was just after Prop 13. Things were a little narrow and tight, and so Claremont had a 2 or 2.5 year commitment of funds, and so they were very gracious and supported me in those things, but I needed to find another place. And so Salinas, you know, California came available. And there's another San Dimas connection there. At the time, they were advertising for the next level position for me. But the city manager was Bob Christofferson in Salinas at the time. Bob is an amazing person. And he was a city manager here for 5 or 6 years in the early parts of San Dimas.
He may have been, maybe not first, but pretty close.
In fact, he was the one who put together the finance plan to build the original City Hall. And so I was excited for the opportunity to work with him. So what you typically do with a job interview is you buy a newspaper when you first get there. So I bought one, and the headline says, Salinas City Manager leaves for Fresno. So I missed Bob. But on the other hand, they offered me the job, and it was in the city manager's office, big city. You know, 120,000 population, you know, 600 employees. I had a variety of assignments and experiences. Great opportunity. And it was interesting to be in a different part of California. You know, the agricultural elements of the Central Valley are just impressive. You know, the broccoli, the lettuce, the celery, the cauliflower, the tomatoes, and how they just, actually those fields it's like a factory, is how they treat them, and how they grow things as seedlings in a greenhouse, and they grow them so that when they harvest, they can replant the seedlings within a week and have another harvest, you know, 50% quicker. So it's just fascinating to be involved in all that stuff, and the agribusiness industry, to learn about it and to have how it affects their commerce. And of course, it's very close to the Monterey Peninsula and all that the Monterey Peninsula has to offer. So it was a great start, just a sophisticated city, and some really great people there too. With Fort Ord being nearby, there's a lot of military in the area. So once someone would retire from the military, there's a lieutenant who retired after 20 years, Lieutenant Colonel. And he just got a job working for Salinas, and over 20 years worked his way up from being a person on a street crew all the way up to be the assistant city manager, and he was my boss. And many times I felt like I was in the military myself as he would give me assignments. And he was so good at following up. He knew exactly when I promised to get something to him or when it was due, and it was uncanny. And I figured out that it was an Army method of filing by date, and so it wasn't that he was really good at that, he just filed well.
Had a good system.
But he said, Blaine, do I need to put a rattlesnake in the toilet to get you to work on this one? And so he gave me lots of military images that helped me to work and focus. He told me once, he said, Blaine, I may not have done this before, but I never make the same mistake twice. And what a great guy, great guy. And so, but I was there 3.5 years and did a lot of the labor relations. I was on the negotiating team primarily as the gopher person, information, minutes of the negotiating sessions. I just learned an awful lot. Met a lot of people in the city because there were 7 or 8 bargaining units, and so the person that was the chief negotiator was also the insurance pool administrator for the Monterey Bay Area Insurance Fund, which has kind of evolved a little bit over time. But there was an opening in southern Monterey County in King City, and he said, Blaine, you should apply for that. So I did, and that worked out, and it was a continuation of great experience. King City at the time was about 7,000 or 8,000 people, and they had a good economic base, and they had a lot of amenity for a small town, and so, but I was very green, to be honest about it, and had more to learn than I could offer. And then some very, very good department directors were just really insightful and helped me figure out the things that were important and the things that weren't. And the things to concentrate on and the things to focus on and figure out how to kind of move an organization and the things forward. And they were so helpful to me. Public Works and Building Inspection, great guys. I think of them often today.
Did you go there as city manager?
I did.
So you were...
Yeah. So, and as a very young city manager, I was 32, and they were in their mid-40s and had been there for a long time. They're very seasoned, but they're also very kind and helpful. And some deep friendships developed over those relationships. I was there for 13 years. We did a lot of great things. It had an airport, it had a municipal pool, we built a new police station, library, we added on to City Hall. And the major industry was a dehydration plant, basic vegetable products. They dehydrated garlic. And so for 3 months of the year, we smelled like a big pizza. and it was wonderful. And then they dehydrated other things. And so there was a huge labor strike, which was really hard on a community that affected the main employer of Basic and those. And so those were real challenges to kind of work through. Economic development, we did our best to kind of help the community grow, and so all those were great things. So, but what a wonderful opportunity. And again, it was 13 years in King City, and it was on that Friday afternoon that Bob Poff called and opened the door for San Dimas. And so, in a way, coming back to San Dimas was like Rip Van Winkle. He kind of fell asleep and then woke up 17 years later. And some things were recognizable as I came back, but the strawberry fields weren't quite as many. There were subdivisions that replaced it, and much of the agriculture or the citrus in the area. And San Dimas had matured its way into a real fine city.
I just kind of an aside, you might want to make a comment, or maybe not, that during your tenure there was a rather famous mayor in one of your cities that you had various associations with.
In
How
Monterey,
was that?
in Monterey County, there's 12 cities that are all kind of joined together as the Monterey County City or City Mayors Association. And so at that time, Clint Eastwood was the mayor of Carmel by the Sea, excuse me. We got to get all the words in there, just how they want it said. So he was quite a mayor, actually. What he did is he wanted to make a full commitment to his 4 years, and so he took no movie assignments, very limited opportunities, so because he wanted to be there for every meeting and be an engaged mayor and do what he was elected to do, what he said he would do. So he was very dedicated in that sense. He also spent of his own money $200,000 to fortify the council chambers, make them a little bulletproof and raise the security level a bit, but of his own money. And so anyway, because there are 12 mayors, each city hosted the Mayors Association on a month. So King City hosted one of those months. I think it was November. And so we didn't have too many places where you could hold a meeting in town. So it was at the bar that had an extra large room to the side, and they just brought in the food and so forth. So we're just kind of minding our own business, knowing that the mayors were going to come at some point soon. And up rolls this really big bus, this customized bus that, as you know, celebrities have. All the windows are darkened, and the door flies open 5 minutes before the meeting, and 11 mayors come out of the bus, and Clint Eastwood is among them. And of course, everywhere that happens, it would cause this big stir. So he comes in with a little bravado and a lot of excitement from all those involved, but he's so accommodating and so generous and kind, meeting everyone and saying something kind to everyone along the way. And so they conducted the meeting, which lasts about an hour and 15 minutes or a half, including the lunch. And then they all got back on the bus and headed out. Well, that was kind of the beginning of the trip for the other 10 mayors and Clint that were on the bus. And we heard later, because our mayor heard it from another mayor, so our mayor just stayed in town and did not go back on the bus because it was headed back to the peninsula. That bus left King City at 1:30 in the afternoon. And those mayors the last mayor did not get dropped off until 1:30 a.m. of the next day. So it's not that King City is that far away from the peninsula. Okay. It's about 50 minutes on an average day. So unless they got lost somehow along the way, and the other thought was there was a need to be dropped off by 1:30 a.m. in the morning the next day. But it's just another one of the little interesting opportunities that come along the way with the characters involved.
So then you came along to San Dimas.
So, the interview process was, I think it started in November, came back, and there's another interview in December, and we worked it out that I would start on January 27th of 2000. So I'm not sure I wanted to deal with the Y2K issue at the time. I thought if I'm going to go through Y2K, I'll go through it with King City, but no, it's worked out strategy-wise for me with my family, that the council let me commute and until the kids were out of school in King City. And so I lived here in town in the Motel 6. So if anybody ever wants to give a critique about what it's like to live in the Motel 6, I did it for 4.5 months. And it was an enjoyable experience. And it worked out incredibly well for me. And so, but then we were able to come down and relocate my family in June and get all settled. And Kurt, again, it was so enjoyable for the family. It was a great move. It was hard to leave, of course. We had 3 kids still at home, and there was a little bit of an adjustment period for them, but it was only a little bit. In fact, the other thought is when I first came down for the interview, I came down from a very small agricultural town. I was very used to that environment. So I'm coming down the 210, come down the 57, and decide to take the Arrow Highway exit. And so I'm not exactly familiar with where I was at the time, and so I kind of inched out of the intersection and turned right about Mamone, and their car came up right next to me behind me and just honked its horn because I was going too slow. And I tell you, at that point I almost thought of getting back on the freeway and thought, maybe I'm out of my league on this one. But nonetheless, I kind of captured my composure and went ahead with the interview, so I overcame that first horn honk to be able to have the discouragement. But you know, as soon as I came, I was so well received and welcomed, and met so many great people, and then the community members starting to meet them and all the organizations and so forth, and I just fanned out and just felt welcomed all along the way. And oh man, Kurt, it's just been wonderful.
It has been wonderful. It definitely has. Well, so what about your career then here? What?
Actually, there's one more thing to say.
Okay, go ahead.
When I came in April of late January of 2000, April 6th, 2000, in walks a real estate person into City Hall. And he said, "My name is Greg Vina. I work with such and such a real estate company, and I'd like to talk to you about Costco's interest in some San Dimas property." I about fell off my chair. You know, anyway, so it was interesting that kind of came, and we've talked about this before. When it comes to economic development or in encouraging, you know, economic development in a community, the research that stores and businesses make is everything to their decision making. And if they come to you or if they call you, it means that you have already passed 80% of the test. They already know everything about you enough that they're willing to open the door and explore the opportunity with you to get the last 20% worked out, because they're confident enough. It's hard to cite a store, especially in a market that works. And so they know what works and what doesn't. So, but it was interesting that it was April 6, 2000, just what, 2 months after I came, that call came, and it was May 17th, 2008, when Costco opened. And so just a tidbit of history that I will always remember.
Takes a lot of time and
right.
And well, and it, you know, I think there was a good example. We owned part of the property, but we had to put the rest
right.
together, and I think we made a very wise choice rather than having some other property agent or attorneys or anybody else dealing directly with the landowners and with the people that were going to have to move and other things. You did that.
Right.
We asked you to take that on as an assignment that you would personally do, and I think that turned out really well for us.
You know, the city wanted to be fair all from the get-go, maybe even more than fair. And so the 17 owners and 29 parcels, there are many times where we would sit down and listen very carefully and try and be responsive. And the thing about it is, Costco, that was our risk. Costco said, if you can assemble the property, here's what we will pay. So many people thought, oh, Costco's paying for this. And they were, to a point.
Yeah, if you could get it for that
because it's a business decision, so they know what they can pay. And if the price is higher than that, thank goodness we had redevelopment to help make up that difference. But, you know, making all that happen, you know, in fact, many of those property owners are still in San Dimas. They'd simply relocated and upgraded too. And I've run into them here and there. And if any of them are watching now, hello to you. You know, I remember of our association together, and I think things turned out well.
Well, I think it did. We didn't end up, the only condemnations were to give them some kind of tax relief. Right. But, and I think that was a good decision, because they were always dealing with the principal, the person who was going to be able to make the decisions for them or for the project. It's turned out we have had an excellent relationship with Costco on the remainder of the property as well.
Right.
That I know we had the ability with Costco, if the outline or with the property, Costco has their own developer really, but as the properties around the ancillary properties, some of those developed right away, but then we had a big downturn shortly after, and they had a limit. We could buy the property back, and basically we, the city council and certainly with Blaine's recommendation, we told Costco we were willing to ride with them during that time. We extended the term. We didn't insist on any more money. Hello, you're on the air. Thank you for calling.
Yeah, hey Blaine, enjoy your retirement. You've been a really good city manager, and You know, Ask the Mayor is my favorite program on television. You know, I'll watch Ask the Mayor when there's a Dodger game on. So that's serious. So,
You're right.
So my question is, will the show continue with Ken Durant?
You know, we have not decided anything beyond this show. I think certainly if Ken wants to do it, we will continue it. If he may have complications I don't know about, but I suspect we will at least do it for a while. And one of the things I sure hope we're able to do is when Blaine comes back from his great trip to England, if he ever comes back, we will try to get him on to tell us about his trip. But otherwise, we will try to keep, if there's enough interest, we'll try to keep this as a method of communications to the public.
Okay. Hey, Blaine, good luck.
Thank you.
You guys have a good night.
Okay, thanks for calling.
Thank you.
Let me offer some history to our viewing public. I've only been on the show since 2001, I think my notes first came. The gentleman sitting next to me, folks, has been on longer than I. I mean, this is a long-running program.
This is a long-running program.
And it's in his, probably in his third decade, because I know it's finished 2 decades at least. So, but the show begins with Kurt, and that's an amazing dedication.
Well, it probably would not have lasted this long if you had not come along to join it.
Well, I just want folks to know this is the 3rd decade of this show, and how many TV shows are in their 3rd decade? Not many.
In fact, there have been a few people who thought we might get canceled.
You know, one thing I guess to kind of be perspective on is I've given some reflection about, you know, things over the last 40 years and some things that have been meaningful for me, and I had the opportunity to share it with some of the employees, and what I wanted to do is kind of impart to them a bit.
Great.
They're young, they're kind of looking to the future as best they can, like we all do. And, you know, and so especially in local government, they just have a lot of questions. And so I took a moment and kind of talked to them. I said, maybe history is one predictor of the future in one sense. And if you've lived the past and you kind of see where you are today, you can see that many times the past is kind of the predictor of what has happened along the way. So maybe you can look at what's happened to kind of look ahead. So I wanted them to know that in my perspective, there's been 9 times that I wondered if cities would have their financial ruin or not. When there was some kind of state, and by the way, of the 9, 7.5 of them came totally from the state of California, not because of an economic situation, not necessarily because of some major loss that the city suffered independently. Almost, you know, 3/4 of the time, it has come from the state saying, you know, Prop 13, we helped you, we're entitled to some of your money because of what we did to help you. It changed the financing and the perspective. So the state started to feel like when we have financial problems, ours are worse than yours. So we're going to help ourselves to some of your city revenues. So of the 9 times that I could have counted those cycles, and each one of them I thought, man, this is tough. Now they've gotten a little bit more serious, but on the other hand, they've also, you know, cities have been resilient and made the tough decisions and tried to address those issues when they came up in a meaningful way. And so there will be more of those as we look into the future. Clearly, there will also be some clear thinking about cities looking down the road to say, what we do is very important, and we will adjust when we need to have our services fit the resources available, but we will also look to be able to have sufficient resources to maintain the quality of life, the safety, the things that are important to a community. So of those 9 times, we've come back each time. So it's going to happen again, but with the good people that are involved, there'll be opportunities too. And I use this quote when I talk to them, because you used Paul Harvey to a young person, they may not have the association, but Paul Harvey said, in times like these, it's always good to remember there's always been times like these.
Yes.
And, you know, other generations have gone through some incredible challenge, and why should we be any different?
Or in the book, The Tale of Two Cities, it's the best of times and the worst of times.
Yeah, and that was a long time before that. So
a long time before that.
The other thing I shared with them is that sometimes when things are hard and uphill, and you feel you've just got yourself to the point of being overwhelmed, and and it's not all you're doing. Sometimes it's a third-party situation, and you're just struggling to know what to do. That under those times when it's hardest, when you're pushed to do some things and think about things that you never would otherwise, it challenges you and it puts you in a position to gain things from that hard experience that you otherwise wouldn't get if things were routine or calm or normal or soft or easy. And so when those things happen, look at it as an opportunity, as a way for a call to the best of yourself to come forward. I told them that we share this hobby. We like reading biographies, and especially of those who did great things. And the founding fathers, incredible stories. And John Adams is certainly one of them. But Abigail Adams, his wife, is a person of great insight as well. And she lived through this stuff, where the challenge of getting the country started and what she did in her way to be able to support her husband, and her son became the president, my goodness. And she wrote a letter to him when he was 10 years old, and it basically said, it's not in the calm of life that good things happen, or the call of statesmanship comes forward, or the best is demanded. It's when things are difficult. And these are times when genius would wish to live, these times. And she knew that under these difficult circumstances, a way would come forward if you keep your perspective. And so I wanted to share that too, because the work of governance, the work of our lives, the work of our business, there's times when you really feel you're up against the wall and you're overwhelmed. Under those conditions, if you keep yourself right, you will find that what you call upon yourself to do will be things that you never would have thought of when things were otherwise easy for you or manageable. And so look to those times with anticipation and know that there's going to be an opportunity for you to get some really great growth.
That is very good advice. It is very difficult to keep that perspective when things are difficult.
It is.
But people who have persevered and made things work,
Yes.
They've done it by keeping that way. I saw a thing that after the bombings in Sri Lanka, a lot of the people there are saying, "Bring back the strong man."
Yeah.
We don't want this we'd rather have a dictatorship than and security. And I think a lot of demagogues and dictators over the years people have said, we want security, and you always give up something for that security. You need to work on having the security without having it imposed by a military dictatorship or something close to it.
Right.
So what other things did you share with the employees?
The other thing I shared was a story. And the story is about someone that worked for Henry Kissinger. I had to take a moment and explain who Henry Kissinger was, because
these are young people.
Some of us know very well, but Henry Kissinger is an incredible mind and leader and insightful person. And so if you worked in the State Department at the time for him, and so he had an assignment that he wanted one of his staff members to do, a white paper on some issue in the world, and to go and analyze this and come up with recommendations for the State Department. And so that assignment was given to a staff member, and all the staff members are top-notch, or you wouldn't be there in his office. So he took 3 days, did all this research and analysis, talked to everyone he could think of to be able to make sure that he was understanding the issue. Maybe it was in the Middle East or something. And he wanted to understand what the circumstances were so that he could make a good assessment and recommendation. And so he worked for 3 days on this to get it all set. And it was just before lunch, and he thought, okay, it's ready to go. So he dropped it off at the secretary's desk, went out and had a bite to eat, came back, and there was his paper on his desk. No marks, no comments, not anything. And he thought, well, maybe I didn't quite do what I was supposed to do with this. So he dug deeper this time, took the paper, researched some of the points a little stronger, made sure that his conclusions were accurate, Maybe they were effective for the area of the world. He just did all the things that he could, and interviewed more people, a broader range of folks, and fine-tuned and actually changed some of his recommendations because of what he learned. After another 3 days, and turned it in just before lunch, comes back after lunch, papers on his desk. He thought, well, I'm missing something here. So he took the next 5 days, and he did everything he could think of. He took every word apart out of the paper, looked at the analyze, making sure that it was backed up, verified, justified, and went even deeper. Made contacts as far as he could go to get all the information he could, and then put everything back together word by word, and to submit what he concluded was his best work. And so he went to the secretary, met her in person this time, and said, "This is the best I can do. I've gone over this paper over and over and over again. I've checked everything, and this is what I've done. This is the best I can do." And she says, "Thank you. Dr. Kissinger will read it now." And I told the story to the employees, and first of them, they thought, the indignation of that secretary, how manipulative she was. She certainly could have told him what the process was. You're going to get 3 times to get this right. And then others said, well, it's Henry Kissinger's fault. He should have told him exactly what he wanted. And I said, okay, that's certainly a couple of ways to look at this. But was the paper he turned in the same paper that he first turned in? Was the last one the same as the first one? Of course not. The last one was his best work. And if you're going to act on some world issue, you're going to want the best that someone has to offer, not just simply a completed paper. You're going to want to know and have assurance that it's the best they can do, because you're going to rely on it.
True.
And so, that's the full intent that Henry Kissinger had with this assignment, was it was something that he could take and rely on because he had confidence in that person. So always do your best. And if you think, it takes too much time, well, if you don't have time to do it right, when will you have time to do it over? And so this encouragement of there's a benefit in doing your best work. And then what I did with the employees, I shared with them some case studies about some employees that worked for San Dimas, and noted how they stuck to an issue and did their best work over a period of time. And I used, for example, Teresa Bruns as one of my examples. Teresa we had a couple of maintenance districts in town. They were upside down financially. We weren't getting the right things done. And Teresa said, this is worthy of being fixed. So she did all the hard things. She met with the residents. She went to the field. She looked at what it was. She met with our staff, with the contractor, assessed what was needed to get it at least off the ground and get it so that it could be put in a situation where the irrigation could work and the tree trimming was done and the landscaping could be maintained at a reasonable cost. She did all of that. And it was a 14-month thing, because these are hard things to.
I remember that.
And so we used to hold those hearings, and we used to have to deal with confused residents that said, why do you want more money when you're not even maintaining what's there? Or why should I give you more money, or you're not doing the right, anyways, all of those things. And we would battle our way through those, or bruise our way through those. But when Teresa got a hold of it and she fixed it, those hearings are completely different today.
Totally. You're right. You're right.
And so can you see that the benefit of doing your best work?
And one of the things of that is also you have to focus on what you can do, because that was a situation where the revenue was fixed.
Yeah.
And it wasn't, as time went by, it wasn't enough to do all the things that we tried to do.
Right.
And she really did get it reorganized. So understanding we have this much revenue, we can do this, and
Right.
we need to do it well. And it turned out that what had happened along the way before that was we just were falling, things weren't working because we were trying to do more than we had the money or the resources to do. And once she went through that process and got that down, but you're right, and the people who were involved were kept totally informed as we went along.
Yeah.
I mean, that was not the only example of the things that Teresa did, that the approach that she took to doing things really worked very well. But that certainly is a great example, because we couldn't change the resources.
Right.
That wasn't possible to put more money into.
And it used to take so much time and emotional energy. And now, see, when you do your best work, the chance of having things done well is greater.
And I think the other thing that you have personally done here, because you have been hands-on in some areas where it was needed, and it is that after dealing with you on things, people come away understanding that what was being done was the best that could be done, and people, I think you had a good way of not being defensive about anything, but whatever the issue was, to take a positive attitude toward trying to resolve it, and to be very open with the people involved as to what you were trying to do.
Right.
And I think that was one of the things, I believe, that sort of filtered from you throughout this entire organization. Some areas more than others maybe, but your leadership is based on that. And I think that has worked out well for the city, that the way you approached the dealings with, I think, with all of the people that you come in contact with, but I think the employees, and I've told you this many times, probably a couple of years after you were hired, and one of the people who worked for the city for a long time, I was over in what was then the Pudding Stone Center, and one of the people drove up in his pickup and stopped, and he said, "I just want to thank you." And I said, "For what?" And he said, "For hiring Blaine Michealis." So, when an employee does that, you think, well, we did something okay.
Well, I'm glad somebody hired him. He was a great guy.
He was a great guy.
Great worker.
He was a real solid guy, and he's the kind of person who, when he said that, you knew he meant it, because he wasn't in for just idle flattery.
Well, he's a good guy.
But we've had some great employees here.
Right.
I think, and this is about you, not about prior people, but you mentioned Bob Poff. Bob Poff was the city manager when I started, and the city's financial circumstances then were very tight. And I think that Bob laid a foundation for the city in a very sound foundation that you have been able, and the reason I bring this up is you commented that with the conversation you had with Bob, that he could look around and see things that he had started that had gone on to. So we have been fortunate in San Dimas to have had very good and stable city managers. And we have been particularly fortunate in the last 19 and a quarter years to have you.
Well, that leads to the other thing I wanted to mention, as far as one of my favorite stories is about, now that I'm going to England, I'll see it firsthand. Slate roofs is a very long-lasting roof. It's rock. It's chipped and so that it's flat enough to use it as a shingle. So it's a great durable roof. The problem is it's incredibly heavy. So the members, the wood underneath to support that weight have to be hardwoods, incredibly strong and so forth. But eventually, over time, the rock overcomes the wood. It takes a while, but it does.
Yes.
So there's a story told about it was time to take and replace the roof on this particular slate roof. So the current day workers started to remove the slate, and carefully so that it could be reused, because you remove the slate so you can replace the members underneath. As they did, they found a message. The message was from the original construction of the roof. The message, in essence, said, if you're reading this, obviously you're working on replacing the roof, and you need to have strong hardwood for the support for this roof. We knew you would need that. So if you look around you, you'll notice that we have planted, for your use, these trees, these hickory trees or oak trees and so forth, near this building so that you would have the wood to use for you to do this roofing project when you needed to do it in the future. I love the story.
That's a great story.
Because when you make decisions based upon long-term factors, you make a different decision. Bob Poff made decisions that were like putting on a roof. They were like putting on a roof. And so Bob left a message for the rest of us about what Bob did. He planted these trees, and he planted them in the right place, and he planted the right trees. Trees of financial stability, trees of public facilities, a post office, a fire station, a location for a sheriff station. You know, Bob Christofferson planted, the 1969 original construction of the City Hall building. These trees that were planted in those times have grown over this period of time and now are available for this generation to do. So what should we do, if not the same thing? To make sure that we are also putting the trees, we're also thinking of the future and making decisions that matter very much by that perspective. And Kurt, to give you a compliment, you approach your job on the City Council very much that way. You look far down the road, and that's where you make your decision. And it makes it easier, doesn't it, sometimes? If you have all these things in front of you and you're trying to make the decision based upon a whim or so forth, it can get confusing.
Well, I think you're right. I think you need a framework for every decision you make has to be. People don't always have elaborate written plans for the future, although everybody does have some planning documents, kinds of things for the future, and we have a lot of things, public works and places of things that we do on a scheduled kind of basis. But I think you do have to have a goal.
Yes.
And you have to be, and I think in government, my view of it is that the job is never going to be finished. And what you really need to do is to be turning over to the next people who are going to carry forward into the future. You do have to not leave the cupboard bare.
Yes.
For them. You need to have, you can't run the whole world on borrowed money. The federal government can because they can print it, but I think there are a lot of things that and I believe that San Dimas is well fixed for now, and hopefully the people will continue to carry that on. But there are challenges that were created in the year 2000 and earlier regarding to our pension issues.
Yes.
The CalPERS, they promised more than we can pay, and as people are now saying, the bill is due. What now? So that was bad planning, not by cities, but by the people who were supposed to know something about pensions, to get us in the financial mess that we're in for now. By the way, I heard at the sanitation district meeting that one of the great financial challenges we faced is the stormwater discharge permit, and that the court has overturned the one that we have thought was it would have taken more money than our total budget every year forever to have met the requirements, and that those requirements have been reversed, at least temporarily. So there was a thing that was imposed on us by someone else that we didn't have the ability to they had to change it, or no city would have been able to do it. And apparently, from what I haven't read the whole decision, but one of the things they said is that the State Water Board has, at least in our region, has taken the position that you have to do things for the Environmental Quality Act, and you can't take into consideration the financial impossibility. And the court said, yeah, you got to consider that. Hello, you're on the air. Thank you for calling.
Mayor Morris and Blaine, this is Marcella. I have one last question for Blaine, since
Sure.
he's retiring. I just want to ask him. Blaine, what is your ultimate wish for this town, to accomplish as far as, something that, you could, I'm going to miss you, Blaine, because you're so good at putting things together. But what is your last and final task you wish for this town to get accomplished?
Sometimes folks have kind of asked, what's your greatest accomplishment or all that kind of stuff.
I'm going to hang up and let him answer that, okay?
Okay.
Thank you.
So they kind of say, well, what do you feel has been your greatest accomplishment? The irony of that is, the way I see it is, the greatest accomplishment is every day is one step closer to something. One step closer to good decisions, or the decisions you make that day are kind of reflective of a path. Because it's, as I mentioned, the Costco project took 8 years. And so you wouldn't want to say that that was an accomplishment, it was more of a path. So the things I would think that we would look forward to the future with is similar to this. It would be continued days that are on a path, so that, the city will always try to do its best with the resources available to make them so that those resources appeal to a quality of life. And so there will be times when the public will join in that process to kind of help make those things happen in decisions. So the public can have confidence that if the city feels that it needs something to maintain a quality of life, the city needs it. Because they've looked carefully at it, and there may be an opportunity for San Dimas to take a look at that in the future. So, but the wish I would have, for us to continue would be is that one thing that San Dimas has done very well is we communicate, we're open, and we listen, and we communicate in meaningful ways. The more meaningful those communication exchanges are, the better we will be, because we'll all be able to understand things the same way, have the same information, because we're really in this together, all of us really. I mean, the city is us. It's not just City Hall. It's us. It's our community and how we view it and how we see it, and our responsibilities toward it, rather than its responsibilities to us.
I think that's a really important point, is that the city government fills a function. But there are a lot of other organizations and people
Right.
that also have a big function in a community.
Yeah.
And it's really kind of the efforts of all the people in whatever volunteer organizations they're in, churches, whatever kind of organizations that people are involved with. Education certainly a huge factor of this, and people who are involved in the volunteers with education, all of those things. It's if all of that effort is moving in the same direction,
Yes.
then that's what makes the community. And moving in the same direction doesn't mean that everybody agrees with every decision, because there are legitimate differences of opinion. And I think the ability to take into consideration those differences of opinion, that's been one of the, I think, Blaine, you have done a very good job of having things that could be contentious issues not becoming contentious because of the approach. We're going to get all the input we can get, and we're going to share all the information, and then we'll all work out some reasonable consensus on how everything should go forward.
Yeah.
And I think that's been the years that I've been involved with you in the city of San Dimas. I think that's been one of the outstanding things in the city. And I attribute a lot of that to your demeanor, personality, the character of the respect you have for people, and of the fact that we all have a vision out there that's,
Yeah.
we want to be on the same road. And sometimes there are things that could disrupt us from that. And, in many times there can kind of be overreactions to things. It's one of our famous people of today sometimes tweets things that would be better to just have somebody not let him push the send button.
Right.
Because it doesn't add to it makes you feel good, I guess, to just snap back at somebody else,
Right.
but seldom accomplishes anything.
Right.
And I could say I have never observed you sort of snapping back at anything. You have just a very measured approach to these things, some of which could be annoying, and I know they are, but it's you have successfully over all these years, I think you've made the environment of the city hall for the employees a lot better than it could have been. And I think that will be a lasting, enduring contribution to the city.
Well, Kurt, thank you. That's very kind. I think we're out of time if our director is.
And the other thing that Blaine did is he groomed, worked on, helped, whatever you want to call it, his successor, so that we are blessed to have Ken Duran becoming the city manager. He's a proven product. He's capable. He's ready, and so a big part of that goes to Blaine, who gave Ken the opportunity to be involved and to grow. Some people, when they have assistants, they consider them to be a challenge and they don't want to give them any help. Blaine has been very generous and has, I think, given Ken the opportunity to really develop to where he'll be a very worthy successor to you.
Agreed.
So thank you very much.
Kurt, thank you.
We're out of time, I guess, but we will be coming back, at least with Ken for a while, unless we decide or he decides that the program really has outlived its usefulness, and if it has, then we'll let you know.